Before I came to Tennessee, I started to experiment with several basic technologies that might be able to enhance learning experience, and one of those being podcasts. And then I arrived at Tennessee, and there was sort of a wealth of resources with colleagues Don Peterson and Barb Murphy. So upon coming here, I sort of expanded the scope of what could be potentially used in the classroom. And for myself, it was more seeing something very basic, simple, something that is not difficult to access, and turning it into a tool for the classroom. Whereas with my colleagues Barb and Don, it was probably a little bit more of the creational, or a little bit more creation from them, rather than just turning something every day into a classroom tool. Initially, with every technology that I've tried to integrate into the classroom, a little bit of the students have responded with a little bit of apprehension at first, but with some general coaxing and actually in-class demonstrations help as well. With websites, with podcasting, after a time or two in class, they'll see that really it isn't, the things that I'm doing aren't that difficult to manage outside of the classroom, and they respond well. Those who have used them, not all students have obviously used the technologies that I've integrated in my classes, but those who have found benefits from them. So,
I got started back in the dark ages of educational technology. I started when I was an undergrad. I switched from music ed to music theory, and my advisor thought that I should know something about technology because that's the way the world was going. So I took some programming classes and continued some of those in graduate school, worked a little bit on beginning CAI in graduate school on a mainframe. And then I got a job in programming for about 7 years, and then got back into teaching. And most of all that I did was university teaching oriented. And then I worked at OCLC, which is WebCat, the library. So a lot of it was very tied into education. So when I got back, I got away from it a little bit for a while, but then I got back into it when I got here because they were very interested in technology and incorporating it into the classroom. And students today know so much about technology before they even get here. They're growing up on it. Now, incorporating some of it into the classroom, like Brendan said, is a little bit hard sometimes because they're used to using it in a very social way, especially Facebook, and they're not used to using it in a classroom kind of setting. And so some of them feel a little weird about mixing the two. So there is some coaxing and some needing to get them on board. But once they see the value of it and try it, I think they usually respond well and jump on it. We set out with this study to compare two different learning management systems within the teaching of music theory. So we used Blackboard for one class, Facebook for the other. What we were trying to find out whether there was a connection between their grades, their achievement in the class, and their participation with the technology. We also wanted to see if there was a stronger connection between either Blackboard or Facebook. We were actually thinking that there would be a stronger connection with Facebook since kids are using Facebook. We also wanted to see if there was a connection between not just the grades, but between the grades and their level of participation.
The Blackboard versus Facebook study is actually somewhat of a culmination of a lot of the different instructional technologies that Barb and I have used over the last several years. And we thought that it would be a nice showcase or a chance to try each of those instructional technologies in the two learning management systems, one of them being a traditional learning management system, obviously, and one of them being a non-traditional social networking platform. There were four categories that were set up for each learning management system. One was a threaded discussion board a blog threaded discussion board that was set up on the wall of Facebook. And so I designed the Blackboard site to look somewhat like the Facebook wall, where there was limited functionality in the Blackboard site. They didn't go looking at grades and all of that. They just had a few buttons that they could access on the Blackboard wall, and that it would kind of resemble what's going on with the Facebook class. So the threaded discussion board, chats, which we had 6 of them during the semester in each class, and they were assigned times voted on by the class. We also had a section for listening links, so every analytical assignment, the students had a listening link that they could go in and access. And then finally, one category that was a grouping of 3 smaller technologies. I felt that the 3 of those should kind of weave together into one course tools section of the course, and that would be podcasts, Google Documents, posting Google Documents for notes and example analyses, and web links, various web links that could go out and do a couple of things with. So the students were given 2 scores at the end of the semester, what we call a TPS score, Technology Participation Score, and then a CAS, Course Assessment Score, which would be like a percentage of a grade. Both of those were numeric from 1 to 100. So that way we could take the 2 numbers for each student and see relationships and perhaps draw correlations between not only overall use of their course management or technology participation with their grade, but also we could look at individual technologies, isolate all of those individual technologies that actually we've been using over the last few years, and see if there was a correlation with each of those individual technologies with their grade. Then we took all of that data and we went over to the statistics department and had some wonderful help from Cynthia Hackney in using SPSS analysis in making sense of it all.
When we first started looking at the results, we wanted to make sure that the 2 groups of students were fairly equal. And since we didn't really keep anything beforehand on like whether this class had higher grades than the other class, we were unsure whether we could look back and say that the 2 classes were equal. But Cynthia in the statistics department helped us, and she said that no, we could look at their final grade for the class. We did, and it turns out that their final grade for both of the classes, which can be seen in Table 1, were both about 81%. So both classes were equal in the end. They both got about the same grade overall. So then we started in on all the different questions that we had, and we looked first at the correlation between their grade and their technology participation score. And we found that there was a high correlation between the 2, which can be seen in Table 2. Then we split the statistics so that we could look at Blackboard versus their grade and Facebook versus their grade. And we found that there was a correlation between Blackboard and the grade, but there wasn't between Facebook and the grade. Okay. That was Table 3. Then in Table 4, we looked at the correlation between grades and individual course tools. And we found that the only course tool that really had a correlation between that and grade was blogs. So when they went out and participated in the blog, or even looked at it, some of them didn't participate but kind of lurked, then it did affect their overall grade. Table 5. We looked at the Blackboard users to see if there was a specific correlation between their grade and web links, okay? Because the web links were links to things that might have helped them in the class, specific tools and programs that made it easier for them to do what they needed to do for the homework assignments. And we found that there was a correlation between the grade and web links for Blackboard, but not for Facebook. We thought maybe there was a difference between girls and guys by gender, but there was no significant difference between the two genders. That's in Table 6. Although women did participate more than the men, and which also in the social technologies, the contributions, we had 36 contributions to the blog on Facebook, but only 1 on Blackboard. 37 messages to the instructor on Facebook, but only 6 on Blackboard. So there was some difference there as well. Again, it was the more social kinds of things, the chats and the blogs on Facebook, the listening, the podcasts on Blackboard. They participated more in the social things on Facebook and the more passive things like listening on Blackboard.
One thing that I found particularly interesting was that there was a correlation between grade and Blackboard, and with a higher technology score in Blackboard, but not necessarily in Facebook. I then really begin to question the amount of time or the quality of time that was spent in Facebook. And that's from noticing and observing. When I would begin chat sessions, I would be more like a curator. I would, I would kind of prompt them and get them going, and then the students would take off in both Blackboard and in Facebook. But after observing the quality of time spent in chats, I also questioned perhaps the quality of time spent on their own with different things after going through the portal of Facebook, as opposed to the portal of Blackboard, where I would maybe contend that it is more difficult to, and that's why maybe the listening, the podcasts that they are listening to online through iTunes U and the YouTube links, I would think that it might be a little bit more difficult to sit through an entire, maybe a work or a podcast, musical work or a podcast, if your Facebook page is open and someone is instant messaging you, or someone is sending a status update, or so I think that the quality of time may have suffered, and that's why we can't get a nice correlation, or we didn't find a nice correlation between Facebook and grade. We found interesting trends, as Barbara was saying, with the social technologies, those being the chat and the threaded discussion board. The perceived helpfulness being higher in Facebook for those, and also the participation of those in Facebook, and the perceived helpfulness and the participation both higher of the oral technologies, I guess you would say, the podcast and the listening in Blackboard. Of course, that might work into what I just said, but also I wonder, each learning management system perhaps has its particular strengths. Blackboard, perhaps one might be able to concentrate a little bit better and focus a little bit better going through that academic portal, although it may not have, as students responded in the qualitative section of their questionnaires that we gave at the semester, that they wish that they forgot that the Blackboard threaded discussion was even there, and that they said no one attended the chat sessions. One even went as far as to say, I wish we would have used Facebook for our chat sessions. So really the social capabilities of Facebook is much stronger, but that can be, I think, a curse as well for Facebook. When looking at the grades from the Facebook students, the highs were higher and the lows were lower, which means if they use the blogs, the threaded discussions, and the chats in a very disciplined way, they could really reap the benefits of this collective knowledge from their class. But if they used it in distracting ways, and they used it to, begin the conversation, and then they really didn't stay on task of their homework or their assignments or in studying for examinations, their grades may have been lower than their Blackboard counterparts. So I think that there's some interesting things, all sorts of interesting things we can draw from the results that we found.
One of the things that we found that was really hard was referring to things in the musical example. So this semester we're going to try using Live Online and a product called NoteFlight. Live Online we're going to use with basically the Share apps part of that, so that we can bring up either a musical example in Finale where we can write it, notate it online, and people can see what we're doing, or to actually bring up a PDF in Live Online and then mark all over the score. So we can say, well, right here. And then the kids can see it, so it's more like us sitting there tutoring the student. With NoteFlight is a product by an outside company that allows you to compose music. So it's kind of like Finale is. It's a music notation thing. But you can post those and people can change them and share them. And so both of these allow this kind of online and interactive, completely just like they're sitting next to each other. And we think that maybe that's going to make some difference in how they respond to online chats and other things, because it is more interactive and they can see and refer to the music instead of having to figure out where everybody is, and by then they've lost the thread of the discussion.